Faceit already has one of the most invasive anti-cheats in Counter-Strike. It runs at the kernel level, blocks suspicious drivers, and can require security features like Secure Boot before you're even allowed to play. But apparently even that isn't enough, because with Faceit Season 9, they're adding a new layer that doesn't only search for cheat software on your computer, it analyzes the way you play. Faceit calls it human input detection, and they claim that it can use machine learning to recognize inputs that no human could realistically produce. So even if an aimbot successfully hides from the anti-cheat, the effect it has on your aim could still expose it. And this isn't just some vague AI feature. Earlier this year, researchers introduced a separate anti-cheat called XGuardian that was tested using real Counter-Strike 2 matches. It analyzed the movement of a player's crosshair and, in its strongest test, detected just over 90% of the cheating players, which raises some pretty obvious questions. How can AI decide whether your aim is human? Could someone like Donk get falsely detected? Is this better than VAC? And if Faceit already has a kernel anti-cheat, why do they even need this? After looking through the research and Faceit's announcement, I don't think this replaces traditional anti-cheat. I think it covers one of the biggest weaknesses traditional anti-cheat has. Faceit's current anti-cheat already operates at the kernel level, which gives it much deeper access to Windows than a normal program. That allows it to identify suspicious software, block vulnerable drivers, and detect attempts to manipulate Counter-Strike from deeper inside the system. But an anti-cheat still has to recognize what it's looking for. A known public cheat may have a signature Faceit can detect immediately. A new private cheat, external hardware, or computer vision system may be much harder to identify through the same methods. Faceit says AI and DMA related cheats accounted for 40% of its cheating bans in May of 2026, so these are clearly already a major focus. Human input detection approaches the problem from the opposite direction. Instead of only asking whether suspicious software exists, it asks whether the gameplay being produced actually resembles human input. The easiest way to explain it is that the kernel anti-cheat searches for the weapon, human input detection examines the bullet trajectory. Even if Faceit can't identify what created the input, the behavior it leaves behind could still expose it. When I first saw Faceit's announcement, I immediately wondered whether they were using XGuardian. The timing makes it seem possible. XGuardian was released publicly in January, while Faceit's system launches in August, and both are built around the same general idea, detecting cheats through the behavior they produce. But there is currently no evidence that Faceit directly adapted it. Faceit says its system was trained internally using Faceit matches and analyzes in-game inputs throughout the entire match. XGuardian is a public research system that mainly analyzes pitch and yaw during short windows surrounding eliminations. Faceit could be studying some of the same aim characteristics, but in-game inputs could also include firing patterns, keyboard actions, reactions, or other data they haven't revealed. So these are most likely separate systems moving in the same direction. XGuardian probably isn't the technology Faceit is using. It's a public example that helps us understand how this type of anti-cheat might work. The most interesting part of XGuardian is how little information it needs. It doesn't need to scan the player's computer, know their sensitivity, or identify the exact cheat being used. All it needs is pitch and yaw. Yaw represents horizontal view movement, while pitch represents vertical movement. Counter-Strike already records both because the server needs to know where the player is looking. When those values are placed across time, they recreate the trajectory of the crosshair, and two movements that look nearly identical at full speed can be completely different when broken down. A human player may accelerate toward an enemy, begin slowing down as they approach, slightly overshoot, and then make a final correction. The timing, speed, and exact stopping point will also vary between attempts. An aimbot can add smoothing, reaction delay, and random error to imitate this. But even when the final kill looks normal, the path toward it may contain repeated patterns that are unlikely to come from a real hand. Maybe the crosshair accelerates too abruptly. Maybe it changes direction without the smaller corrections created by visual feedback. Or maybe it slows onto the target in almost the same way across multiple fights. A human and aimbot can arrive at the exact same pixel. The difference may be hidden in the journey. XGuardian converts that journey into features such as velocity, acceleration, and angular change. It also knows when the player fires and when an elimination occurs. Instead of analyzing the entire match equally, it focuses on a window of roughly 1.5 seconds around each kill. That captures the buildup, movement onto the target, shot, and immediate aftermath. Each elimination produces its own suspicion score, and these scores are combined across the match. That matters because one ridiculous flick isn't enough to prove someone is cheating. Legitimate players hit suspicious looking shots all the time. The real evidence comes from the same underlying characteristics appearing repeatedly. The model can also highlight which eliminations and aiming characteristics contributed most to its judgment. So instead of only saying a player is suspicious, it can point a reviewer toward the exact moments that need attention. An obvious rage aimbot that instantly snaps between players isn't the difficult part. The real value comes from detecting assistants designed to look human. Human aim is not simply random. Our movements follow patterns created by reaction time, visual feedback, biomechanics, and the corrections we make while approaching a target. At the same time, modern aimbots don't have to be perfectly smooth. They can introduce delay, overshoot, noise, and variation. So the system has to recognize something more complicated than shaky means human and smooth means cheating. A legitimate player may make an initial movement based on peripheral vision and then correct after visually confirming the target. An aimbot already knows the target's exact position. Even with smoothing, the relationship between that initial movement and final correction may still be different. Those differences may be almost impossible to notice in one clip, but become clearer when the same pattern appears across many eliminations. One of the more interesting XGuardian examples involved suspicious behavior where the crosshair barely moved at all. A player using information assistance had already positioned their aim around the opponent before the fight began. Because they knew where the enemy was, they didn't need the same searching or correction a legitimate player might show. So it isn't always the ridiculous snap that exposes a cheat. Sometimes it's the fact that the player never needed to find the target. The researchers tested XGuardian using real matches played through 5e Play, a prominent Asian esports platform based in China. Across their Counter-Strike 2 datasets, they analyzed nearly 3,000 matches, more than 3 million aiming operations, and nearly 32,000 elimination trajectories. In its strongest test, XGuardian achieved 90.7% recall with a false positive rate of 4.1%. Recall describes how many actual cheaters the system successfully detected. So in that test, it caught slightly more than 9 out of every 10 cheating players. The researchers also reported a 12.5% improvement over the previous academic method they compared against. But that does not mean it was 12.5% better than VAC. It was compared with other published behavioral detection research, not Valve's private system. And 90.7% was the strongest result, not its performance in every test. Even that strongest result also reveals the biggest issue with this technology. A 4.1% false positive rate is still far too high for automatic permanent bans. A 4.1% false positive rate sounds low until you apply it to a population where most players are legitimate. Imagine the system evaluates 10,000 players and only 100 are actually cheating. Using the paper's strongest results, it would catch around 91 cheaters, but it would also falsely flag roughly 406 legitimate players. So the review queue would contain more than 4 innocent players for every actual cheater. This is only an illustration using XGuardian's results, not a prediction of Faceit's system, but it shows why a behavioral flag cannot automatically equal a ban. Faceit says human input detection will instead be weighed alongside its existing anti-cheat signals. That is probably the responsible way to use it. The behavioral model identifies suspicious players and moments, the kernel anti-cheat looks for technical evidence, reports, account history, and other systems add more context. The AI doesn't have to prove someone is cheating by itself. It becomes another independent piece of evidence. The most obvious concern is what happens when the system analyzes someone like Donk. If the AI is looking for inputs no human could realistically produce, the best mechanical players are naturally going to exist closest to that boundary. The same question applies to high sensitivity players, unusual mouse grips, and legitimate accessibility hardware. But rare and inhuman are not the same thing. A professional may react faster and correct more accurately than almost everyone else. Their movement should still contain the variation and feedback patterns created by a human motor system. Meanwhile, an aimbot could purposely move slower and less accurately while still producing repeated software-generated patterns. Faceit says its model continually learns from its highest-ranked players and that legitimate non-standard inputs are included in its training. It also says unusual behavior will not be judged on its own. Those are important safeguards, but Faceit has not released its accuracy or false positive rate, so we can't independently verify how well it handles every edge case. I don't think Donk is going to be banned because he hits one ridiculous flick. The more realistic risk is a legitimate input style that is poorly represented in the model's training data and repeatedly appears abnormal. That is another reason the AI needs supporting evidence from the rest of Faceit anti-cheat. We also can't say this system is more effective than VAC because Valve has never published comparable efficacy numbers, and these systems are looking for different types of evidence. Traditional detection searches for known cheat software, a kernel anti-cheat can inspect suspicious drivers and deeper system manipulation, behavioral AI studies the result inside the match. If Faceit identifies the exact cheat running on a computer, that is stronger evidence than an AI deciding the player's aim looks suspicious. But when the cheat is completely unknown, behavioral detection may still identify it through the movement it produces. It also has clear blind spots. A radar or information cheat could affect someone's decisions without directly controlling their mouse. So this isn't automatically better than VAC or Faceit anti-cheat. It detects a different part of the problem. The strongest solution is multiple independent systems searching for evidence that is difficult to hide at the same time. Once anti-cheats begin studying player behavior, cheat developers will begin studying the same thing. A humanized aimbot can add reaction delay, smoothing, overshoot, random error, and variation between engagements. If cheat developers understand what the model considers suspicious, their goal becomes generating movement the detector classifies as human. So this becomes another arms race. The anti-cheat learns what cheating behavior looks like, the cheat learns what human behavior looks like to the anti-cheat, but behavioral detection still makes the cheater's job harder. They no longer only have to hide the software, they also have to hide every effect it produces. The aim might look human while the reaction timing doesn't. The timing might look human while the player repeatedly acts on information they shouldn't have. And even if the behavior looks normal, the kernel anti-cheat could still identify the mechanism behind it. If Faceit combines mouse movement, broader in-game inputs, and its existing kernel protection, the cheat has to make every layer look legitimate at the same time. That doesn't make cheating impossible, but it gives cheaters significantly less room to hide. I don't think Faceit simply took XGuardian and added it to their anti-cheat. They were most likely developed separately, but both systems represent the same change in how developers are approaching cheating. Traditional anti-cheat looks for the software responsible. Behavioral anti-cheat looks for the evidence that software leaves behind. XGuardian showed that pitch and yaw alone can contain enough information to identify a large percentage of aim assist users in a research dataset. Faceit is now applying the broader idea to real matches and combining it with the kernel level protection it already has. There are still major questions. Faceit hasn't published the accuracy of its model, its false positive rate, or exactly which inputs it analyzes, so we won't know how effective it is until it's actually used at a scale, because they probably will never publish it. But the important part is that Faceit says this will not operate as an automatic AI judge. It gives the existing anti-cheat another perspective. The kernel driver watches the computer, human input detection watches the player, and when both independently find something suspicious, hiding becomes much more difficult. The future of anti-cheat might not only be proving that someone installed a cheat, it might also be proving that the actions happening inside the server could have actually come from a human. Faceit's human input detection launches with Season 9 on August 5th, so now we get to see whether it actually makes a difference.